to this deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're exploring fascinating intersection of music, technology, and law.
Right.
We've got some excerpts from academic papers, legal documents. We've even got web pages.
Oh, wow.
All about the rise of EDM,
Okay.
specifically the dubstep scene,
Right.
and how it's all played out online.
So
Think of it like kind of a behind-the-scenes look at how the internet and social media have completely reshaped how music is made, shared, and experienced, even.
And we'll be focusing on Bassnectar, kind of a DJ who really embodies this shift.
Right.
Yeah, using his career as a lens to understand both the incredible opportunities and the potential pitfalls of this new digital landscape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone who needs a quick refresher, EDM stands for electronic dance music.
Right.
Which basically exploded in popularity in the 2000s.
Yeah.
But we're zeroing in on dubstep, a subgenre that emerged in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And our sources suggest its sound was heavily influenced by the urban environment and the rise of digital tech.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's fascinating how dubstep production really embraced software.
Oh, yeah.
Like Ableton Live, the program that allows you to create and manipulate sounds digitally, kind of like a high-tech musical Lego set.
Wow.
The shift from analog to digital tools really changed the game.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you didn't need a fancy recording studio to make music.
Wow.
Just a computer.
Yeah.
And some creativity.
So it democratized music creation in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It lowered the barrier to entry for aspiring artists and helped fuel the rise of bedroom producers.
Okay.
People creating incredible music right from their homes.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the music itself, but what about the cultural context?
Yeah, that's a good.
Our sources keep mentioning this term,
Okay.
networked culture.
Right.
It sounds a bit academic.
It is.
Can you break that down for us?
Think about it this way.
Okay.
Before the internet and social media, musicians relied heavily on record labels and traditional media to get their music out there.
Yeah.
You were mostly a passive consumer listening to what the industry decided you should hear.
And that all changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With the rise of affordable mobile devices and platforms like Facebook and Twitter, artists and fans could connect directly, bypassing those traditional gatekeepers.
Interesting.
It's what scholars like Dana Boyd and Henry Jenkins call participatory culture.
Okay.
You're no longer just listening.
Yeah.
You're part of a network where you can share, recommend,
Right.
and directly influence what gets popular.
So dubstep emerges at this perfect moment where the technology and culture are both primed for this kind of networked music experience.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's where Bassnectar comes in.
Okay.
He really mastered the art of leveraging this new landscape.
Wow.
He was incredibly active on social media, using platforms like Twitter and Facebook to build a devoted online community known as Bassheads.
But wasn't his music itself also a big part of his success?
Absolutely.
I've heard his sound is pretty unique.
It is. His music was definitely groundbreaking.
Okay.
He blended elements of dubstep with other genres, creating this really powerful, immersive sound.
Okay.
But what's interesting is how he combined that innovative sound with an equally innovative approach to connecting with fans.
Right.
He really understood the power of the internet and social media.
Yeah, I'm curious, what was it actually like at one of these Bassnectar shows?
Imagine a huge crowd.
Okay.
Incredible energy. And this totally immersive sensory experience.
Okay.
He wasn't just playing music.
Yeah.
He was creating an atmosphere.
I see.
His shows featured elaborate visuals.
Wow.
Intricate lighting design.
Oh, wow.
And of course, that signature bass-heavy sound that just vibrates through your whole body.
Yeah.
It was more than just a concert.
So the live shows were almost an extension of his online community building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And his immersive music tour, which hit 17 cities, really exemplified that approach.
Wow.
It wasn't just about touring. It was about crafting an experience. And the fans responded.
Yeah.
He was selling out arenas.
Wow.
Attracting huge crowds.
Yeah.
All without the backing of a major record label.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
He really seemed to understand how to leverage this new digital landscape to his advantage.
He did.
Now, Let's talk about how he bypassed the traditional music distribution model back in the day. If you wanted to get your music out there, you pretty much had to go through record labels and big music retailers.
Right.
They were the gatekeepers.
Yeah, they were.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of control over which artists got exposure and how music reached the public.
Right.
But the internet, especially platforms like SoundCloud, completely disrupted that model.
They did.
Yeah. So SoundCloud allowed artists to upload their music directly.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Giving them more control over their work and how it was shared.
Yeah. And because SoundCloud was free to use, it was accessible to anyone.
Oh, wow.
Making it a game changer for independent artists like Bassnectar.
Wow.
He could release music on his own terms.
Yeah.
Build a following directly and bypass those traditional gatekeepers.
Wow. And social media was another crucial piece of the puzzle.
It was.
Think about those like and recommend buttons we see everywhere. Right. They basically turned everyday people into tastemakers and influencers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the power of networked culture.
Yeah.
You're not just relying on a few industry executives to decide what's good.
Right.
You're relying on your friends, your online communities, and your own individual tastes.
I see.
And Bassnectar's freestyle releases on his website and SoundCloud are a perfect example of this shift.
Okay.
He wasn't waiting for a record label to tell him what to do.
Right.
He was connecting directly with fans.
Yeah.
Giving them music on his own terms.
It sounds like a golden age for both artists and music lovers.
It does.
But I'm guessing there were downsides to this new model, too.
Yeah.
Were there any challenges artists faced using a platform like SoundCloud?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
While platforms like SoundCloud were incredible for visibility and reach, they also presented some challenges.
Oh.
For example, making money from your music became even more complex.
That makes sense.
With so much music being uploaded and shared for free, artists had to find new ways to generate revenue.
It's a trade-off.
Absolutely.
Right? More freedom and control, but also more responsibility for figuring out the business side of things.
For sure.
And we can't forget about the listeners.
Yeah.
Think about the impact of increased internet affordability and mobile connectivity on music consumption. Services like Rhapsody were emerging, offering massive libraries of music at your fingertips.
At your fingertips.
But that must have created a whole new problem, information overload.
Right.
How do you even begin to sift through all that music?
That's where those social networks and online communities became even more important.
Nice.
They acted as filters, helping people discover new music through recommendations from friends, online reviews, and those all-important like and recommend buttons.
So you're not just browsing aimlessly through a giant music library. You're tapping into your network, finding music that people you trust have already vetted and enjoyed.
Precisely.
It's amazing to see how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
The music itself, the technology that enabled its creation and distribution, and this new culture of participation and shared discovery.
Right.
It really feels like a paradigm shift
Good
in how we experience music. I think it's important to step back and look at Bassnectar's impact overall. You know, he was a huge figure in the music community.
Totally. It's more than just his music. I mean, he had a reputation for philanthropy through his interactive giving fund.
Yeah.
Focused on youth activism and encouraging his fans to get out there and, volunteer for these social causes.
Yeah, his ambassadors program is a good example.
Yeah.
You know, he was encouraging his fans to get involved in all sorts of positive things. Cleanups, food drives, voter registration. A lot of people really connected with that.
He's definitely putting his money where his mouth was, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He donated a lot of his earnings to that fund. Like, there's documentation showing him giving, $20,000 in grant money for these educational projects.
So you have, on the one hand, you have a public figure accused of some serious stuff.
Right.
And then at the same time, he built this legacy of positive contributions. Does one outweigh the other? I mean, it's a lot to think about.
It's a big question, yeah. Can you consider someone's good deeds, when you're also evaluating these allegations against them? It's tough. There's no easy answer to that. It's about how we judge people, especially when there are these, completely opposite stories going around.
It really makes you think about cancel culture and, whether a person can be defined by their mistakes, if they even are mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Oh, wow.
And we want to be very clear up front that we're not here to take sides or offer opinions on these allegations.
Correct.
Our goal is to present the information found in the legal documents objectively and to explore the complex legal issues at play.
I understand.
This is a sensitive topic, and we want to approach it with respect for all involved.
I agree.
Okay, so with that in mind, are you ready to dive into the specifics of these allegations?
Absolutely.
And unpack what we've learned from the legal documents?
It's important to examine this side of the story as well to get a more complete picture of the complexities of networked culture and the potential for harm that exists alongside its many benefits.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So to start, the basics. We've got 3 women, Rachel Ramsbottom, Alexis Bowling, and Jenna Houston. And they're all accusing Lauren Ashton, who you know as Bassnectar, of having sexual relationships with them while they were underage.
And at the core of their accusations is this idea that Ashton used his position, his influence as Bassnectar, to coerce them.
Right.
And how coercion is defined and proven in court. That's a big part of this whole legal battle.
And just a note, from what we see in the documents, it's not so clear-cut.
Right.
Like some of the headlines might make it seem there's a lot of debate about whether Ashton actually knew their ages or should have known and things like that.
Yeah, the evidence is pretty conflicting in how you interpret it. Like, for example, you have Jenna Houston, one of the accusers, and she actually told Ashton to book a plane ticket for her using a fake birth date.
Wow.
So it's, that detail alone adds another layer of complexity to this idea that he was knowingly engaging with a minor.
Huge.
Yeah.
So how is Bassnectar responding to all of this?
Well, he's denying everything. Any wrongdoing, he says, it was all consensual. His legal team is really challenging this idea of coercion, saying it's based on, misinterpretations of what actually happened.
Okay, so they're basically saying that these claims, the whole thing is a misunderstanding.
A big part of it is attacking this idea of coercion. Like, they're basically saying, no, these were consensual relationships between adults.
Okay, so to do that, they're basically pointing to specific things that don't add up with the accusations.
Exactly, yeah. They're highlighting the inconsistencies in the accuser's stories, like times when they initiated contact with Ashton themselves or continued to talk to him, even after the alleged incidents.
So they're saying that things were a lot more nuanced than the accusations are suggesting.
Yeah, precisely. They're saying there's no real evidence to support these claims of force or threats. It's basically, according to them, it's just a bunch of, conflicting accounts, making it impossible to really prove coercion in court.
So basically, without any hard evidence, it's all just talk.
Right.
What about the whole statute of limitations argument? How big of a deal is that?
That could be a game changer, you know? It could potentially derail the whole case. If too much time has passed, those claims become invalid. That's what they're arguing.
Well, that seems like a pretty tough hurdle for the accusers.
Yeah, it's there for a reason, right? It's meant to prevent these old claims from coming up when you don't have the evidence anymore, or memories are fuzzy, to make sure the process is fair for everyone. And that's what Ashton's team is pushing for. The documents also mention a phone call between Ramsbottom and Ashton in 2020, several years after their initial contact. What was the significance of that call?
This phone call is interesting because Ramsbottom recorded it without Ashton's knowledge. And during the call, Ashton seems to acknowledge the power dynamics at play and even expresses concern about the potential legal ramifications of their relationship.
Do you have any examples of what he said?
He makes statements like, "If you think it's worth me living forever in a Tennessee jail to be raped or beat to death," and "Do you think I deserve to be in jail in Tennessee?"
Wow, those are pretty strong statements, especially coming from someone accused of these kinds of acts.
It's hard to say for sure what his intentions were during that phone call. Some might interpret his words as an admission of guilt, while others might see them as a clumsy attempt to appease Ramsbottom and mitigate potential legal fallout. There's also the whole issue about the accuser's sexual histories. The court is allowing discovery into that.
Yeah, which has caused a lot of controversy.
Big time.
Discovery is just a legal process where each side can request information from the other, to build their case.
Right.
But in this case, the court has said Ashton's team can access the accuser's sexual histories. And people are saying that's relevant to the case, and others are saying, that's a complete invasion of privacy.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, there are strong arguments on both sides. Some people are saying, well, this is crucial information. You need to have the full picture. But then you have the other side saying, no, this is a way to shame the accusers, and it might discourage other victims from coming forward in the future.
Yeah, it's a sticky situation. Legally, ethically.
Yeah.
How do you protect victims while also making sure everyone gets a fair trial?
Yeah, it's about boundaries, right?
Yeah.
The boundaries of privacy in the legal world. And what happens when you start asking those kinds of questions?
So you've got this whole legal battle, complex arguments, evidence that could go either way, controversial decisions from the court, and then you have public opinion, which sometimes just operates on a completely different level.
Yeah. People can be really quick to judge, especially with social media these days. Things spread so fast.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how public opinion and the legal realities of this case line up or don't, and what's influencing how people see it.
Yeah, it's a good question. People, they make decisions based on what they hear, which might not be everything, or they have their own biases, and those are really hard to change even when you show them something different. Like, the legal process is supposed to be slow and impartial, but public opinion is totally driven by emotion and, knee-jerk reactions.
Right. So there's this disconnect.
Definitely.
And it can really affect people regardless of what the court decides.
Absolutely. You know what's really striking about this whole thing? It's all about the stories, the narratives. Each side is presenting their version of what happened. And the jury has to figure out, okay, which one's more believable?
Like two competing stories, right? Fighting to be the one that everyone believes. And how you frame it, what you say, the evidence, it all matters.
It totally does, yeah. That's where the lawyers, they're not just presenting facts, they're like storytellers. They're building a narrative to get the jury on their side, to make them see it their way.
That's wild. I mean, how much of this is just about being persuasive?
Yeah.
It's not just the facts, it's how you make people see them.
Exactly. And this case is a perfect example of that. How you look at things, your own interpretation, can lead to totally different conclusions.
Totally. Okay, so let's look at the evidence. What are they using each side to back up their story?
Well, a lot of it, like we said before, comes down to communication. Those text messages, emails, all that stuff between Bassnectar and the accusers.
And each side's reading those messages differently.
Right.
To fit their story.
Right, exactly. The prosecution, they're going to look for anything that suggests grooming, manipulation, like those messages where he's showering them with compliments or giving gifts, making them feel special, like they owe him something. Oh, I see. And the defense, they're going to focus on the stuff that looks like a normal relationship, maybe even affectionate, between two adults who want to be together. Like, times when the accusers reached out to him first or said nice things.
Okay, so it's all about how you read those messages.
Right. And it's the jury's job to look at everything and decide, okay, who's telling the truth here?
It's like cracking a code, Trying to find the real meaning in those messages to see what the relationship was actually like.
Totally. It's hard, too, because with online stuff, with text messages, it's hard to know what was really going on, right? You don't get the whole picture.
Right. So we have these messages, but then you also have the people involved, right?
Yeah.
They'll probably have to testify, tell their stories directly.
Yeah, almost definitely. And that can have a huge impact on a jury. Hearing it straight from the source, seeing them, hearing their voice, you can really tell if someone's being truthful or not.
Yeah, but people's memories, they aren't always perfect.
Oh, absolutely not.
They can be influenced by so much, trauma, how much time has passed, their own biases.
That's right. And that's why the jury, they really need to pay attention to how the witness acts. Are they consistent with their story? Do they have a reason to lie?
Right. Because even if someone sees something with their own eyes, that doesn't mean their memory is perfect.
Nope. And that's where the lawyers come in again, right? They have to question the witnesses, point out the things that don't add up, and build that story, the one that helps their client.
It's a trip, this whole courtroom thing, like a movie, but with real consequences. You never know how it's going to end.
Totally. And it shows you how, the system isn't perfect. It's all run by people, and people make mistakes. They have their own biases. It's messy.
Totally. Okay, so we've got the evidence, but there's something else going on here. Jenna Houston.
So her allegations are quite serious. But the documents also mention that Houston provided Ashton with a false birth date when booking a flight. Could that be relevant to the case?
That detail is potentially significant because it raises questions about Ashton's knowledge of Houston's age. Did he have reason to believe she was older than she was? The legal documents also highlight an email in which Houston specifically instructs Acton to book her a flight using a fake birth date. This evidence could support Ashton's claim that he was unaware of her true age.
It seems like this case, like the others, hinges on a lot of nuanced details and interpretations of events. There are conflicting accounts and a lot of gray areas.
Absolutely. And that's why these cases are so complex. The legal system is designed to weigh the evidence, consider the arguments from both sides, and ultimately determine whether Ashton is liable for the accusations against him.
It's clear that this situation extends far beyond the music itself. How do you define consent? Especially when one person has so much more power.
So with Bassnectar, the accusers are saying he basically used that power, that fame, to get them into these sexual relationships.
Right.
Like he was manipulating them.
Yeah, exactly. They're saying he used his status, being this famous musician, to make them feel special, to groom them, to put pressure on them, so they would do things they wouldn't normally do.
Like by giving them gifts and compliments, all that stuff.
Right, and by, letting them into his world, his inner circle, they're saying it made them feel like they owed him something.
Okay.
And obviously the defense is saying, no way, it was all consensual. He never used his fame to pressure anyone. They'll probably bring up those times when the accusers reached out to him first, said they liked him, trying to show that it was mutual.
So it's another situation where it's his word against theirs.
Right, and that's where you get into the whole believing survivors thing.
Yeah, that's been a big thing these last few years, especially with Me Too. The idea that we should trust people who come forward with these stories, that we should be on their side.
And it's important, it encourages people to speak out, to not be ashamed. But it doesn't mean that every accusation is automatically true.
Right, it's about making people feel safe to tell their stories, to be heard, to know people care. But in court, you still need proof. That's how the system works.
Exactly. It's about supporting people, but also making sure the process is fair to everyone.
So the jury, they have to figure this out. The power dynamics, was there consent, who's telling the truth? It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And whatever they decide, it's going to have a huge impact, not just on Bassnectar and the accusers, but on the whole music industry.
In this case, it's really got people talking.
Oh, yeah.
About what happens in the music industry, how common abuse is, what are the responsibilities, for the artists and the fans.
Absolutely. It's making everyone look in the mirror, thinking about how things work, the power dynamics, and how they can be abused.
It's like this wake-up call, right?
Yeah.
That even in places where it's supposed to be all about, creativity and fun and community, even there you can find these dark things happening.
Right. And it's a reminder that we need to be more aware, to hold people accountable, to build a culture where everyone feels safe and respected, no matter who they are.
Okay, so we've talked about the evidence, this whole power dynamic thing, what this all means for the bigger picture. But before we move on, I want to talk about the media, how they've handled all of this.
Yeah, the media coverage has been, it's been something.
It's been all over the place, right?
Yeah.
From these crazy headlines to deep dive analyses to conspiracy theories popping up online.
It shows you how divided people are about this case. And it also makes you think about how you report on this kind of stuff, right? Especially these days, with instant news and everyone on social media.
The media, they have so much power to shape how people think.
Oh, totally.
And with a case like this, where everyone's got strong feelings and there are all these different sides, you got to be careful. You got to be responsible.
Absolutely. You got to stick to the facts, avoid that sensationalism, and give everyone a chance to tell their side. And
you got to think about the people involved, right? How what you say might hurt them or affect the whole case.
Yeah, for sure. It's a balancing act, You want to keep people informed, but you don't want to mess with the legal process.
Okay, so let's look at how the media has been covering this Bassnectar thing.
Yeah.
What have you seen? And how do you think it's affected what people think?
Well, one thing that jumps out is how much they focus on the juicy stuff, the sensational details, instead of the bigger picture, the legal stuff, all that.
Like if it bleeds, it leads, right? Controversy sells.
Exactly. Exactly. And that can be really damaging. It distorts things, makes people afraid, makes them distrustful.
And it makes people jump to conclusions. Like they decide someone's guilty or innocent based on a headline or a tweet instead of looking at the actual evidence.
Yeah, and that's a big problem with these cases, especially when you're talking about sexual assault. It's such a sensitive topic. People get really emotional about it.
Right.
So you got to be careful. Just because someone's angry doesn't mean they're wrong. But it's also important to remember that everyone's innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, it's a tough situation.
Definitely. Another thing I've seen is this tendency to frame the whole thing as believing survivors versus innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
And that oversimplifies things, you know? Supporting survivors is important, no question. And sexual abuse is a real problem. But we also have to make sure everyone gets a fair chance. You can't just assume someone's guilty before the trial even starts.
It's walking a tightrope, you know? And the media, they need to be sensitive to all of that.
Absolutely. And it's not just the traditional media, right? Social media is blowing things up too. Yeah. Both sides, accusations, defenses, all of it. And a lot of it is just like straight up false.
Yeah, so much misinformation, rumors, and, once it's out there, it's hard to stop it.
It's like a free-for-all, Anyone can say anything, whether it's true or not, and that makes it really hard to figure out what's actually going on.
It's a mess. And it means we all have to be careful, check our sources, get different perspectives, don't believe everything we read online.
Yeah, be skeptical, think for yourself, and remember that not everything that looks flashy or juicy is actually true.
Right. So the media, they've been a big part of this story, and not always in a good way. Mm-hmm. And it's probably going to stay messy as the case keeps going.
Probably, yeah. It's a wild ride, and who knows how it'll affect what people think or even what happens in the courtroom.
Okay, so we've looked at the evidence, this whole power dynamic thing, how the media is playing it. This case, it's not simple at all.
No.
It's all tangled up. Accusations, defenses, all these fears and anxieties that we have as a society.
And it's a case that makes us ask some tough questions. How do we deal with abuse? What does consent really mean? How do we make sure everyone's treated fairly?
Yeah. It's forcing us to think, to really listen to each other, and to talk about these tough issues.
Totally. And no matter what happens, this case is going to have a big impact on the music industry and beyond.
What if new evidence comes out that clears Bassnectar's name? How would public opinion change? Would people even buy it?
It's a really interesting question to think about. I mean, you've been doing a lot of research on this case. You've got court documents, social media discussions, even a blog post from someone who says they're a bass head.
And a lot of this first came out online, right? There was that Instagram account at Evidence Against Bassnectar, where people were sharing their stories and what they called evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. That account was huge in shaping how the whole thing was seen, gave accusers a platform, amplified their voices.
That's for sure. It definitely fanned the flames. Shows how divided even Bassnectar's own fan base is on this. Wow, that's interesting. You've got some who fully believe the accusations and others who are more skeptical.
For sure. There's no real proof.
It's a good reminder that this isn't just about legal arguments. There are real people whose lives are being impacted by all of this.
Absolutely. And to really get into how the public might react if Bassnectar was actually cleared, we've got to look at the defense's arguments about the accuser's motivations.
Okay, so this is where things get even trickier.
Yeah, you could say that. The defense is basically saying, look at the timing of these accusations. They came right when the #MeToo movement was taking off. They're suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the accusers saw a chance to use that movement for their own benefit, financially through settlements or whatever.
So they're implying that the accusers might have seen this as a way to get money from Bassnectar because he's famous.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. And it's a tough argument to swallow, especially for those who believe the accusers.
For sure.
It just adds another layer to this already complicated situation.
Yeah.
And then there's this other document you found that shows one of the plaintiffs admitted to having a history of being abused in past relationships.
Whoa, that adds a whole other dimension to things.
It does, doesn't it? It makes you realize that trying to understand everyone's motivations, their experiences, is incredibly complex. These cases are almost never just black and white.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much personal history, individual psychology involved.
Yeah, and that all plays into how things actually happened and how people see them.
So as we try to picture what would happen if Bassnectar was exonerated, you've got to keep all this in mind. What would it take for people to actually believe his side of the story? How much would they care about his philanthropy?
Yeah, that's what we'll dig into next. All right, welcome back to our deep dive. We've been laying it all out. The accusations, what each side might be thinking. A lot to take in, huh?
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
So let's switch gears a bit. Let's say Bassnectar is actually cleared. What would it take for people to change their minds about him?
That's the question, isn't it? We've got this massive amount of evidence and accusations, people arguing back and forth. The fan base is so divided.
For sure.
Like, imagine if there was some brand new evidence that came out, something totally unexpected that completely cleared Bassnectar.
Wow. Yeah.
It'd be like a bomb went off.
It would. And how would people even react? Would they believe it? Would there be a feeling of like relief, anger, just total confusion?
It's crazy to think about. You've got people who've already decided what they believe, you know, no matter what. Some might see it as like, finally, truth wins, justice prevails. Others might be like, see, the system is rigged. Powerful people get away with anything.
Yeah.
And then there's Bassnectar's career. Could he ever really come back from this? Could he just go back to performing, making music like nothing happened?
It's hard to say. The music industry is rough. Public image is everything.
It really is.
Even if he's cleared, like, legally, there's still that shadow hanging over him. Some places might not want to book him. Some fans might boycott his shows. People he used to work with might not want to anymore.
It'd be a huge risk, even if he had proof he was innocent. It makes you think about, like, redemption in this day and age, the internet and everything. Can someone ever really rebuild their reputation after something like this?
It's tough.
It's like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. Once it's out there, it's out there. The internet never forgets. Even if the legal case is over, people online will probably keep talking about it forever.
That's a great analogy, and it goes to show how powerful public opinion is. It doesn't always follow the law, People decide for themselves what they believe based on what they see and hear, and once they've decided, it's really hard to get them to change their minds.
It's like those echo chambers you hear about on social media.
Exactly. Opinions just get louder and louder, even if they're not based on facts.
Facts don't seem to matter as much anymore.
Sometimes. So that's why this idea of Bassnectar being cleared is so fascinating to think about. It makes you really examine how we form our opinions, how we weigh evidence, and how we deal with this crazy digital world where information, true or not, spreads so fast.
It's like a real-life example of how truth and perception get all mixed up in the age of social media.
Absolutely. And as we imagine this scenario, this possible exoneration, we can't forget about something else you found in your research, Bassnectar's philanthropy. I mean, he's got a long history of donating to charities through his Interactive Giving Fund.
Yeah, that's right. I've got the website for the Interactive Giving Fund right here. Years and years of donations to all kinds of organizations, environmental groups, social justice causes, millions of dollars.
Exactly. So that raises the question. If he was cleared, would his philanthropy make people more likely to forgive him?
Wow.
Would they see it as proof that he's a good guy deep down?
It's possible. Some people might be more willing to believe he's innocent if they see him as someone who's genuinely tried to help others.
Right.
Like maybe they'd see it as him showing remorse or trying to make up for what he allegedly did.
It could be seen as a redemption arc, a story of someone who messed up but ultimately used their position to do good.
Yeah. It could be a powerful counter-narrative to the whole sexual misconduct thing. And then there's that blog post you found from Psychic Princess Creation. This Bassnectar supporter really emphasizes that point.
Right. They talk about how hard it is to square those accusations with the image of Bassnectar as this generous, socially conscious artist. That kind of perspective might get more attention if he's cleared.
But then again, some people might see his giving as just a way to try to buy his way out of trouble, to distract from the accusations.
Yeah, you've got a point. It could be seen as just trying to manage his image, to repair the damage.
It makes you wonder, why do people give to charity? Is it always from the goodness of their heart? Or is it sometimes about protecting themselves?
That's a deep question. And honestly, it goes beyond this one case. But it's something we should all think about. We need to be smart about the information we see, understand the biases that might be there, and consider why someone might be presenting information in a certain way.
We have to be skeptical. We have to learn how to tell what's true and what's not, especially when it feels like everyone's trying to use information as a weapon.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, as we keep going with this what-if scenario, we got to keep these questions in mind. How would people view Bassnectar's charity work? Would it be seen as something that makes up for what he might have done? Or would it be seen as manipulation? These are the details we're going to unpack next.
All right, welcome back for the last part of our deep dive on the Bassnectar case. We've been really getting into this what if. What if he's completely cleared by new evidence?
It makes you think about a lot, right? Public opinion, whether someone can redeem themselves.
Yeah.
And how tricky truth is in the digital world.
Yeah, that's a lot.
We've gone through court stuff, social media posts, tried to see things from different angles. But honestly, there's no easy answer here.
Definitely not. And as we wrap this up, I want to go back to something you mentioned before, this idea of the court of public opinion. It's like a whole other trial going on online with its own rules, its own consequences.
It really is. It's like a Wild West out there. Judgments get thrown around so fast, reputations get trashed in seconds. It's true. And that's something we got to remember, especially if we're imagining Bassnectar being exonerated. Even if a court says he's innocent, the court of public opinion might not let him off so easy.
Makes you think about how long accusations stick with you, especially online. Even if someone is proven innocent, it's like that accusation is always there in the background.
Yeah, like a stain that never quite comes out.
It brings up some pretty big questions about fairness, innocent until proven guilty, all that.
Absolutely. The legal system and public opinion, they don't always line up. They work on different timelines with different ideas of what proof means.
And with Bassnectar, social media's made that even more obvious. Both sides, the accusers, the supporters, they've used it to share their stories, their evidence, their thoughts.
Right.
It's made things so divided.
Yeah. A lot like the rest of society these days, huh? So much polarization.
It is. It makes you wonder if Bassnectar was cleared, would that help people come together? Or would it just make them dig in even deeper?
Hard to say. It probably depends on what that evidence is, how it's revealed, even how Bassnectar himself reacts.
It's complicated. A lot of moving parts.
For sure. But it's good to think about these things, because it makes us confront how tricky truth is, how we see each other, whether someone can ever truly be redeemed, especially online.
It reminds us that we have to be careful about what we believe. We have to look at things from different sides, not rush to judge.
Couldn't agree more. So as we end this deep dive, I'll leave you with this thought. No matter what happens with this case, it's changed everyone involved.
It shows that behind all the news stories, the legal fights, the online arguments, there are real people whose lives are being deeply affected.
That's important to remember.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you something to think about, helped you understand how complicated this case is, and how hard it can be to figure out what's true in our digital world. Keep asking questions, keep learning, keep trying to understand the world around you.